Hey Stats class, Dave Stobland here. Sorry I can't be with you, but here is some information about measuring data. Now, so far in class we've talked about that we can do a survey or an experiment to get data, and what we're talking about today is that we actually have to do careful measurements in our survey or our experiment to get good data. So this slide is titled, "But what about the patients?" And this is all about what are called clinical trials. Clinical trials are when new medicines or surgical procedures are done to test to see if patients can be made better. And typically, clinical trials measure things like blood pressure, tumor size, is a virus in a person's blood going downwards. But what really matters to patients is my quality of life better? So there are some vocabulary things that we need to know, and they are instrument, units, and variables. And I think it's easiest to look at an example. For example, if you were to measure your bed, the instrument that you would use is the tape measure. That's the tool that does the measuring. The unit of measurement could be centimeters, it could be feet and inches, and the variable is the length of the bed. Now, you could use other instruments. You could use, instead of a tape measure, you could use like a laser distance measuring device, and you could measure in meters instead of centimeters, and you could measure the width instead of the length. You could measure a student's college readiness, and as an instrument you could use the SAT exam. The unit of measurement would be a number between 400 and 1600, and the variable would be the total score. Another example could be maybe you want to measure how safe it is to travel on the highway. So an instrument that you could use could be reports from the government's Fatal Accident Reporting System, FARS. The unit of measurement could be the count of fatalities, and the variable would be deaths. For any statistical study, you want to ask yourself, how is the variable defined? Is there a valid way to measure that variable? And how accurate is that measurement? So let's talk about highway safety. Measuring length is easy, but how do you measure highway deaths? You have to define what a highway death is. What if a pedestrian is hit by a car? Is that a highway death? What if people in cars are hit by a train? Is that a highway death? What about somebody who dies 6 months later after an accident? Is that a highway death? The government definition is that a person must die within 30 days of an accident to count as a traffic death. What do you think? Is that valid? Is that accurate? Let's switch subjects and talk unemployment. The government defines people as being unemployed if they are available and they are looking for work. So if you want to work but you're too discouraged to keep looking, then all of a sudden you don't count as unemployed anymore, because you have to be available and looking for work. So what are some different ways that could cause the unemployment rate to go down? Well, if people drop out of the workforce because they stop looking for a job, the unemployment rate goes down. Now, in 1994, the government changed the definition, and the unemployment rate actually went up. but realistically nothing changed, just the definition. So you have to determine whether a measurement is valid. So let me ask you this. If you measure a person's height with a tape measure, is that valid? I say yes. If you measure college readiness of a student by ACT score, is that ready? Is that valid? I think maybe not. How about college readiness by the height of a student? Well, let's see. A fourth grader is shorter than a high school graduate, so maybe height does talk about college readiness. But then again, there could be some 19-year-old kids that have stunted growth and are very short, and so they are college ready, even though they're short. So maybe not on that validity. How about grade point average? Is it possible that that could be valid? Again, maybe not. Because I think that there are other things besides ACT score, height, and grade point average that determine whether somebody is college ready. Maybe their maturity, maybe their work ethic. Those things could all figure in to college readiness. Let's talk about highway safety again. In 1991, there were 41,500 deaths. In the year 2000, there were 41,945 deaths. Did the highways become more dangerous? What do you think? There were more deaths. Well, what actually happened was there were more deaths, but when you look at the year 2000, there were more drivers and they drove more miles. So did the highways become more dangerous? They really didn't. If you look by the number of deaths per the number of drivers, or you look at the number of deaths per the number of miles driven. When you look at a rate, the highway deaths actually go down and the roads become safer. So oftentimes a rate, which is a proportion or a percentage, is a more valid measure than a simple count. Let's talk about validity again. When students take the SAT or the ACT, is that a valid measure? Well, you could ask yourself, does it consider intelligence, learned knowledge, test-taking skills, motivation, work ethic, maturity? It's hard to tell because college readiness is not easily defined. Maybe a better question would be, do SAT scores help predict students' success in college? Success is probably easier to define than college readiness. So oftentimes in statistics, we have to be very careful about what we describe as that we're going to measure. There's a thing called predictive validity, and a measurement method has predictive validity if it can be used to predict success. So for example, SAT scores generally do have predictive validity because it's been shown that higher SAT scores generally result in more student success at college. Is it 100%? No, but generally it is predictive. So that is the lesson. If you look in your book, there are some reading to do, 10 pages, 24 to 34, and there are some problems that you can work on. I'll make sure the answer key is available to you. Thank you.